This video is going to cover finding the slope of a line, and we're going to look at it two ways, from a graph and from just when we're given two ordered pairs or 2 points. So first, let's watch this video. It's a little cheesy. There's no words to it. It covers a lot of the basic concepts of slope just to get an idea of what we're talking about visually when we look at slope. So what I want you to do is just jot down some of the important stuff you see as we go through the video, and then after the video we'll kind of pull out those important things that we should have taken from the video and then go more in depth. Good, so there were some key concepts in there of slope that we'll cover here as we move on. So first, one of the things that hopefully you were able to identify in the video is what does it look like if I have a positive slope or a negative slope. So a positive slope is when the line is going upwards. So it looks like that in that first example. So you notice that as the line got steeper, more plus signs came. So that just meant it was still positive, but it was just more steep than the other. And then lines with positive slopes go upwards as x increases. So that's what I was talking about. As the slope gets bigger, then the steepness gets higher. And then the second is the negative slope, so that's when it's going down. So positive is up, negative is down. And then again, the negative slopes go downward as x increases. So let's go through and let's fill in some of this information. So the steepness of a line is called slope. That was what the video was all about. Circle the line with the biggest slope, so that would be the steepest line. The letter we use for slope is a lowercase. You may know this, you may not. That's an M. And again, a fun fact, it just comes from the French word. So you should have pulled this, or hopefully you identified this from the video. When given a graph of a line, we need to know a simple definition of slope, and that is rise over run. Okay, and the visual I like to give with this is rise over run. So think of yourself sitting in your chair. In order for you to run, you have to stand up first. So your rise is you're going to either stand up or sit down. And that's your rise, the up and down. Your run, well, if I tell you to run, you're not going to run towards the ceiling. You're going to run right or left. So your rise is your up or down. Your run is your right or left. So slope is the ratio of a line's blank change. So let's think about that, up and down. Think about your XY axis. If I want to go up and down, that is what axis? Your Y. So when I say rise or up and down, that is going to look at your Y change, because that's the axis that goes up and down. Whereas then I tell you to run, that's right or left, and that's your X. So in other words, our rise, so I'm just giving you lots of different, would be your Y values subtracted. Your run is your difference in X values. And we'll do some examples of those. So let's look at, how do I find the slope given a graph? So first, we start at the point furthest to the right. It doesn't matter, it's just easier if we do that. I'm sorry. Take that back. Furthest to the left. My apologies. And the reason I say to do that is because we read left to right. So I think when we go to look at something, it's just a natural for us to go to the left for this point and then work our way to the right. You don't have to, and I'll show you that both ways so you get that concept. So we find the rise. So if I'm looking at this example here, let's find a point. So I'm going to go to this point right here. Okay, and the only reason I'm picking that point is because if you notice, if I continue down this line, there's no other real point that falls on a nice cross, but that one does. So I'm going to start right there. And then I want to figure out, well, what is my rise and my run to get to a next point? I could pick any point from this point on up the line, but I'm going to pick this point again just because it falls nice on the cross of those lines. So the rise, let's see, I'm going to go up. In order to get from this first point here to that second point there, I have to go up. So that's 1, 2. So that's 2 steps up. And think of it like that. Think of it like you're giving directions from one dot to the next dot. So to get to this dot, I take 2 steps up. 1, 2. Then I go from that point, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So that would mean putting it in slope. Well, I would do my rise over run, which would make the fraction 2/5. That means I go up 2 to the right 5. That's what that's telling me. Slope is directions. All right, let's look at the bottom too. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pick this point here again because it falls nicely. And then I'm going to pick this point way down here. You could have picked this point right here. Okay, either of those would be fine and we would get the same slope. So I'm going to stick with this point just to show you for examples. So if I want to go from this point to this bottom point, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. So because I'm going down 6, that's a -6. Then I'm going to go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So because I'm going to the right, that's positive. That's going to be 8. So think of the number lines too. In my y-axis, as I go down the y-axis, the numbers are decreasing. That's negative. As I go to the right on the x-axis, those numbers are increasing. That's positive. So when I look at this -6/8, well, I can simplify that. That would give me -3/4. So that would be your final answer. Slope has to be simplified just like any other fraction. So let's go back into the graph and let's look at this other point that I told you could pick. So let's say you picked that point and you didn't pick the one that I picked. Well, how do I get from one to the other? I go down 1, 2, 3. That's where I got my -3. And I go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would have got -3/4 anyways, you just wouldn't have had to simplify it. Okay, in the next one, let's do that point, and this point I think will be the closest right there. So on this point I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a positive, and then I go to the right 1, only one step. So any number over 1 is that number. So my slope here for the second one would be 4. All right, and again, slope's directions. -3/4 is down 3 to the right 4. All right, so I'll go ahead and help you with the dots. Go ahead and find, and you can pick your own dots if you really want to. Go ahead and find the slope of these two. So pause it, try these two last ones, and then hit play and see if you can get them correct. So for this third one, my slope would be up 1, that's positive, to the right 2, that's 1/2. For the last one, I go down 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a -4, and I go to the right 1, so that would just be a -4. Good. Okay, so let me show you, because I made this point up here to start at the point furthest to the left, but let's say you didn't. So let's take this last example just so you can see. If these were my points, let's say I didn't start with this top point, I started with the bottom. That's okay, we just still have to remember that I always go up and down first. So if I start with the bottom point, I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a +4. But then what happens is I go to the left, that's negative, that would be a -1. 4 over -1 or -4 over 1 still gives me -4, it doesn't matter. Okay, so either way you go, you're still going to end up with the exact same. If I look at this third, let's say I didn't start with this one, I started with the top one, this one, the one to the right. Well, that I would go down 1, that'd be a -1. Then I would go to the left 2, which is also a -2. And a negative over negative is positive. Okay, so don't get hung up on starting at the point furthest to the left. The biggest thing with slope is we always have to give directions up and down first, then right or left. Okay, so let's move on to one with slope when we're giving 2 points. So we've already talked about this. M equals rise over run, or in other words, your change in y's over change in x's. Okay, so that's a duplicate of what we did. So let's take this example here. I want to find the slope between 1, 7 and -2, 3. So the first thing we're going to do is pull out these y values. Well, your y values are 7 and 3. So I'm going to subtract 7 and 3. Okay, so I'm going to subtract those two. That would give me my change in y's. How much did my y value change from one to the other? Now, when I go to do my change in x's, the only important thing is that I do it in the same order. So your x values are 1 and 2, or negative 2. So because I went from 7 to 3, I have to go 1 to negative 2. I can't do them in out of order. So this is 1 minus a negative 2. Notice I have two negatives, or two subtractions, or a negative and a subtraction, because the 2 is negative. So that would give me 7 minus 3 is 4. 1 minus a negative 2 is 1 plus 2, which is 3. So the slope between these 2 points is 4/3. Now, just again for show, let's say we did it in the other direction. So instead of doing 7 to 3, we did 3 to 7. That's okay as long as we do negative 2 to 1. So 3 minus 7 is negative 4. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. But again, a negative over a negative is positive, so you end up with the same slope. So order doesn't matter as long as we go in the same order. So for our first example we did, remember, subtracting a negative means to add. Okay. All right, so let's go through these examples together. So I want to find the slope, difference in y's, so let's do negative 1 minus 2, and then we'll do 6 minus 4. And as I go through these examples, if you ever want to just pause it, try them on your own, and then play to see if you get them right, please do that. I do have a pause and try on the next slide though. So this would give you negative 3 over 2. All right, the next one, 3 negative 2, so 3 minus a negative 2. Make sure you have 2 signs there. And then 4 minus 3. This would give you 5 on top, 1 on bottom, or just 5. Right? 7 minus 1, negative 1 minus a negative 3. Watch out for the double negatives. That's 6 over negative 1 minus a negative 3 would be a positive 2, which is 3. And the last one, 4 minus 5, and 3 minus 6 would give you a negative 1 over negative 3, which I'm not going to leave it like that because a negative over a negative is a positive. So that would be positive 1/3 is the slope. Good. All right, go ahead and pause it. I put the formula down here for you so you have it to refer to if you'd like. But go ahead and find the slope between these 3 points. Hit play, and then you can see if you get them correct and find your mistakes if needed. All right, the first one, I would do 5 minus 0, and then negative 2 minus a negative 1, which would give you 5 over negative 1, which would be a negative 5. 2, 3, 4, and negative 2, 4. So we got 4 minus 4 and 3 minus a negative 2, which would be 0 over 5 or 0. And the last one, negative 2 minus 2, and 6 minus 1. That'd be negative 4 over 5. Very good.